Ideas. Now, in 1970, a group of 16 mainly Jewish dissidents bought all the tickets for a small internal flight in the Soviet Union under the guise of travelling to a wedding. In fact, they intended to hijack the plane and escape to the west, but they were intercepted by the KGB on the runway of an airport near Leningrad. They included the husband and wife, Eduard Kuznetsov and Silva Zalmanson. Eduard and the other leader of the group were sentenced to death, while the rest received long prison sentences. The death sentences were commuted following an international campaign, and Silva and Eduard were eventually released in prisoner swaps with the West in 1974 and 79, respectively. Their case also led to a major change in the highly restrictive Soviet immigration policy. Well, a new documentary film about the story called Operation Wedding comes out next month. It was made by Silva and Eduard's daughter, Anat Zalmanson-Kuznetsov, and I asked her why her parents tried to flee the Soviet Union.
Well, first of all, Soviet Union was very anti-Semitic. So specifically for Jews, they wanted to live even more. They just wanted to go to where they belong, to Israel. Also, after you ask the exit visa, then you would probably get fired from your job. Some of the people in the group, by the way, they were kicked out of universities. My father was already released from prison after he was there for 7 years because he wrote an anti-Soviet newspaper. This group of people, they felt like it's either live or die. They felt like they couldn't go on.
Clearly, a hijacking is a very serious criminal act, yet that's what they were going to do if they got away with it.
The truth is, they bought all the tickets to a small plane. It was a 12-seat plane. They had a pilot. So all they were doing is borrowing a plane, which would be returned later under Geneva laws to the country, and just fly 15 minutes to cross the border.
As we know, that didn't happen. They were arrested by the KGB at the airport. Do we know how the KGB got to hear about the plan?
We assume about 200 people knew about this because a lot of people knew and they said, no, we're not going to do it. Oleg Kalugin, the former Major General of the KGB, said also in my film, if more than 2 people were in a conversation, we would listen to them.
The Soviet system in that sense was very simple. If you have a dinner, the KGB will get a report about what they talked at the dinner table.
So more than 2 people know about it, the KGB knew about it.
Now, the consequences of what happened initially were the trial and the sentences, in 2 cases, initially a death sentence, which was eventually commuted to long prison sentences. Yet longer term, there was a change in the emigration policy of the Soviet Union as a result of this, wasn't there?
The Soviets thought that they would show the world, here you go, you see those Jews, Zionists who try to fight for free immigration, they're basically terrorists. But then the free world, they saw it differently. They said, okay, those people who didn't want to hurt anyone, they just wanted to leave the country. When people start to demonstrating, let my people go, then the Russians start to release people just to show, here, you see, we're releasing people. So very quickly after the trial, they released, I believe, about 30,000 people in the first year, in the 1971. And during the whole 70s, almost 400,000 people were getting exit visas, among them 300,000 Jews.
What about the making of the film from the point of view of you and your relationship with your parents? How was that?
Me and my mother, we traveled to what used to be the Soviet Union. We were in one of the prisons that she was at, and I was shocked.
Be strong.
I didn't realize the terms were that hard. I didn't realize they were in a small cell, no window. There was no a place that they all eat together. They just eat in a room, and every day they get each of them get 30 minutes alone in the yard. That was the hardest part for me, thinking about my mother when she was 25, which is 10 years younger than I am today, going into this cell and not knowing when she's going to get out of it. It brought me closer to my parents, and I feel it is and it was part of my destiny to make this film about my parents, because if I wouldn't do it, the memory would have been lost.
Anat, Zalmanson-Kuznetsov. Well, Edward and Silva now live in Israel, and the film will be screened at the Hollywood International Independent Documentary Awards, which are on the 11th of June. I think it's a story, Claire, that you were aware of prior to that conversation.
I was. I think this is the most fantastic story, and I really urge people to try and get to see the documentary. I've seen snippets of it. But, I mean, there's loads of things that strike me about it. I mean, first of all, these are young people, and what they did was incredibly brave. And actually, it's interesting because the truth is that the organisers suspected they wouldn't succeed, and they say that in the film. They sort of say, but they had this idea, well, we're going to try it. Because even if we fail, it might draw attention to what's happening in the Soviet Union. So that, I think, takes some courage.
Which is what happened.
And that's exactly what happened. Yeah. But there's also sort of some very poignant parts where, you know, actually after they get arrested, they're in isolation. So they hear in isolation, they're told by the guards, I think, that there's all these raids on their friends and that people have been rounded up. So the despair at thinking they'd tried something political as an action and it was backfiring, and then the contrast with that when they realised it actually made a difference. But I think also we heard those comments about anti-Semitism. This is a big raging issue in the UK at the moment. It's a reminder, you know, anti-Semitism is a very live, modern phenomenon. It was going on in the Soviet Union then. We worry about its tropes being dragged up and regurgitated thoughtlessly in the UK at the moment. But it's also a reminder that Israel was a place of freedom that people were trying to escape to. So let's remember that before we kind of stick the criticism too hard on that country.
You're listening to Weekend with me, Julian Worricker. Now we're going to end the programme by